Wisdom. It's an incredibly valuable asset. Some would say more precious than gold. It's attractive, appealing, admirable. Conversely, a lack of wisdom is the basis of immaturity, blind spots, and bad decisions. Wisdom. It can be gained over time, but it can't be rushed. But wisdom can be shared. That's precisely what we are here to do right now. Today, we are here to hack wisdom, to distill it, to understand it, and to process it. Why? To get better at life. Welcome to the main thing. This is your new Wisdom Podcast. I'm your host, Skip Linneberg, and I've set out to interview the wisest people I know. We'll see what we can learn from each one when they're faced with an incredibly difficult, soul-piercing question. From Parkwood Studios in Charleston, West Virginia, this is the Main Thing Podcast, where we feature wisdom conversations with the world's wisest people. I'm your host, Skip Linneberg, and I want to thank you for joining me for part 4 in our special series, Wisdom Conversations with my mentor, John. A note to our listeners. The audio of John's voice was ripped from a set of videotapes recorded in the fall of 2004. Those tapes sat in a box in my garage for over 10 years. As a result, the audio is weak, partly because John's voice had been weakened by cancer and chemo treatments, but also because of the effect of aging, weather, and temperature exposure from my unheated garage where those tapes sat for a decade. You'll want to turn up the volume when you hear John's voice. I promise you the exceptional quality of John's wisdom message will outweigh the somewhat low and poor quality of the audio. When I first visited Wells Home Furnishings, I thought I was walking into the future of retail. The front of the store was alive with energy, a special entry vestibule bathed in luxurious lighting, and a high-end sound system playing music that lifted your mood from the moment you stepped inside. The showroom wasn't a grid, it was an adventure trail, each turn revealing a new room vignette, each space telling a different story. Sales associates were polished and professional in their branded blue Oxford shirts, button-down collars, and tucked into one corner was a vintage soda fountain where shoppers could grab a cookie, a pretzel, and an ice-cold bottle of Coca-Cola. This day was my first visit to Wells Home Furnishings. They were my newest client, and I could see the precision and care behind every detail. Before I could finish that delicious ice-cold bottle of Coke, John turned to me and said, "Skip, this stuff is all fine. The showroom is important and you can see the care that we put into it. But now, I'm going to show you where the true impact of the Wells brand originates." We stepped into the warehouse. Rows of crates and pallets, bundled furniture awaiting delivery. In the front right corner, a loading dock with concrete ramps tilted toward daylight. John laid a delivery blanket on one ramp and motioned for me to sit. "Let's sit right here," John said. "I've got a story to tell you, Skip." That's where this wisdom lesson began, and what he shared wasn't about furniture or marketing. It was about adaptability and the humility it takes for even a celebrated leader like himself to change course. You see, John Wells Jr. was already at the top of his field. He had been honored by President George W. Bush. He had been named an Ernst & Young Entrepreneur of the Year. Yet in this story, John shows us that real leadership requires the courage to listen, to adapt, and to trust the vision of a new generation. Because sometimes the true measure of success isn't what you build out front, it's what you learn behind those double doors where courage, humility, and transformation take root. So lean in as John Wells Jr. shares his story, The Courage to Change.
My point is this. You have to think like your customer thinks. We opened the store, and 6 weeks into the thing, the furniture starts to come in. So we start delivering the furniture. How did my son and I, how did we become so successful, and how were we able to start a business at 56 years old in my case? In his case, he was 20 years younger at 36. And he came in there one day, and we all had an office in one room. He says, well, I'll tell you what we're going to do. Starting January 1st, we're going to start calling these customers on the phone. And we're going to ask the customers, do they get a good delivery? And I said, well, not with me around, you know. He says, why not? I said, well, because I've been in business for 30-some years, and I have lots of experience. And I'm telling you, you're opening a can of worms. People find things wrong with stuff, you know, after you deliver them, and maybe there's really nothing wrong with it, and they just think there is.
We're inviting criticism.
He said, well, look, don't you think we want to find that out now instead of later? And I said, I suppose so, but I just don't think we should do it. He says, well, I'm sorry you feel that way, but we're going to do it anyway. So January the 2nd came along, and he came in at 7 o'clock that night. We were open till 8. He says, well, we're going to call 12 customers today. We had 12 deliveries. And I said, well, I'll see you later. And I got up and went back on the loading dock back here and sat down for about 20 minutes. Came back up and I said, well, how did the calls go? He said, well, every one of them were good. We didn't have one complaint. I said, you were just lucky. I'm telling you right now, you were lucky, lucky, lucky. It's not going to happen that way tomorrow. And he said, well, we'll see. So tomorrow came, and he came in the next night, and I did the same thing, and the same thing happened. We had 11 deliveries. No complaints. I said, did they say anything about how the furniture looked or anything? They said, no. Did they say anything about the price of the furniture or the value of it or anything? No. They just talked about the service. Oh, okay. Well, that goes on for about 3 weeks. He came in there and he said, well, I'm going to make the calls. And I said, well, go ahead and make them. I'm not going to go out to the dock, but I am going to put my hands over my ears. He came in there one night. This was like 4 weeks later. He said, listen, I've got a problem. He said, I got to go out of town, and I'm 5 days behind. And there's 64 calls that have to be made. He says, you got to make these calls. Dad, you got to do it. We got to keep up this program. I said, well, okay. And so he said, well, here's the list, 64 people. Well, he really challenged me. I sat down and started making these calls. And the calls went something like this. Hey, Mr. Lindbergh, this is John Wells over at Wells Home Furnishings. I just wondered if our people got there on time today and were courteous in the delivery of our furniture. That was my question. Well, out of the 64 calls, several of them were tape recordings where the people weren't there. I think maybe 25, something like that. So it left 35 calls. After I made those 35 calls, I came into our company and I called a meeting. I said, I want everybody together here. I want to give you a little message about something. And so they all got together. And I told them the story about going home and making those calls. And I didn't get one single complaint out of the 64 calls. And I felt 10 feet tall. I was so energized by their energy. You see what I'm saying? I did. In other words, I heard from the back place in the business to the front place of the business, leadership. We began to notice more and more because of that dialogue with that customer. See, most people don't ever have an opportunity to ever hear from the customer. I love to call people and say, and leave a recording and say, this is John Wells. I'm calling to make sure that we got there on time and took good care of you. And I'm sorry I missed you. And if we didn't give you the service that you deserve, I want you to call me personally tomorrow at 343-3600 or at my residence, and I give the residence number. But when you can say that with energy and confidence, what you're doing is you're giving confidence to the people that are representing you, and they know when they get up and go out on that truck that John Wells or his son or partner is going to touch that customer before that day's over. So my point in this whole little episode is to say this, that today I think a small business has an opportunity to compete with large business. It's just that small business has to do some things better than large business, because large business overwhelms us with all of their investment and all of their buildings and all these different things. For small business has a greater opportunity by having the family touch with the customer, and for them not to take advantage of that connection and that dialogue with the customer is just like throwing it in the garbage can. If they say, oh no, I don't want to do that, they're giving up the best opportunities that there is out there.
Wow. Every time I hear John tell that story, I'm reminded that adaptability isn't weakness, it's wisdom in motion. It's having the courage to listen to your customers, your team, your family, and your inner voice. John showed us that true leaders never graduate from learning. Even after decades of success and national recognition, John chose to grow again. By trusting the vision of his son and business partner, Johnny, and stepping into a new way of serving people. Maybe that's your invitation today, to listen again, to call again, to change again. Because when you have the courage to change, you might just rediscover the very thing that made you successful in the first place. Thanks for joining me for part 4 of our mini-series, Wisdom Conversations with my mentor, John. If this episode spoke to you in some way, if it resonated with you, I encourage you then to share it with a friend or colleague who's navigating change in their own life or work. And don't forget, you can find every episode of the Main Thing Podcast at our website, themainthingpodcast.com. Until next time, I'm Skip Linneberg, reminding you to keep asking, keep listening, and keep seeking wisdom. That goes by incredibly fast, doesn't it? Time flies when you're hacking wisdom. Thank you for listening to this wisdom conversation. If you enjoyed this podcast and found the wisdom lesson valuable, then I encourage you to share it with a loved one or friend. Did you know podcast recommendations from one person to another remain the strongest form of podcast growth worldwide? It's true, and we'd appreciate you helping spread the good word. Let's give a big hearty thank you to the crew of the Main Thing Podcast. These are the folks who truly keep the wisdom pipeline flowing. Audio engineer Bob Hodgkiss, strategy advisor Andy Malinowski, public relations and partnerships guru Rachel Bell, social media and digital marketing expert Chloe Linneberg, graphic designer Emma Malinowski, and of course our patrons, those generous folks who provide monthly funding support to help underwrite our costs of production. I couldn't do it without you, nor would I want to. Your feedback matters a lot. If you have a question, a suggestion, maybe an idea, or even a nomination of a future show guest, I'd love to hear from you. Email me at info@themainthingpodcast.com. Well, that's a wrap for this show. I'm your host, Skip Linneberg, signing off for now and inviting you to join us again next time for another special delivery of wisdom.